just off the bat, it has to be said how low-key of a miracle it is this movie even came out. This movie was technically announced before some people who saw it were even alive. I remember exactly where I was when I first saw the article saying that Warner Brothers had acquired the movie rights back in 2015. Keep in mind, that's right after FNAF 3. I unfortunately can't find the original article I saw back then. I remember it had Toy Bonnie as like the graphic image, but that just goes to show that this movie was in development hell for 8 years, to the point that most people didn't even think it was going to come out. But for as long as it took, I do to some degree think that it was a very good thing. Scott cares enough about making something he thinks the fans would like, rather than just taking the first deal and script that came his way. He made sure that he had a final say and creative control, which tells me he truly actually cared about making something cool. He really could have walked away with a bag a long time ago, and granted he still got a bag anyway, but still. I remember back in the day when he talked about some of the canned scripts, some of which were pretty ass. Like, I really want to see how bad Plushie's Take Manhattan would have been. But even all jokes aside, I wouldn't even have been mad if it was just a Silver Eyes adaptation. But ultimately, I think it was best to do it in its own continuity. And I think it's really good that it fell out of Warner Brothers' hands, considering how strangely they've been making business decisions. But who knows, maybe in that timeline, by now we would have had FNAF Endgame, or even Freddy in Multiverses. Remember that game existing for like 5 minutes? I think the movie finally landed at Blumhouse in around 2017, so it took 6 more years and a few different directors till we finally got peak in 2023. Also, yeah, spoilers, I like this movie. This video isn't here to try and convince you to like it if you don't already. I know many didn't, and if that's you, then this video probably isn't for you. I'm just here to yap about something I find cool, okay? So, being completely honest, I've never covered a movie before, so I have no idea how to structure this. And I'm kind of deathly afraid of the potential copyright nightmare. Universal, please don't atomize me.
Yo guys, it's me, Charlie. Hey, did that guy just turn into sand?
But I think firstly, we'll quickly go through what I liked most from the core story and get more specific when we talk about some of the main characters later. As most of you probably know, this movie is largely an adaptation of FNAF 1, but also taking some elements of the Silver Eyes. The crux of the story revolves around Mike Schmidt, as you would expect. However, it's pretty clear that in this continuity, Mike Schmidt is not an Afton. At least, I don't think so yet. Pretty unlikely. Although the parallels between the two are definitely there. Both named Mike, obviously, and both of them have a little sister and a little brother. His little sister being named Abby, which is an anagram for baby. Mike only ends up as the guard at Freddy's after beating the ever-living shit out of some guy. I get that he has trauma and he assumed the kid was being kidnapped, but imagine it from the kid's perspective. A random man just tackles your dad into the fountain and absolutely wails on him. They never really show the results of that, but I feel like Mike would have had way more consequences. He was beating the shit out of him, dude. Maybe his coworker Jeremiah vouched for him, I don't know. But I do think that this movie gives a good reason for Mike to keep coming back every night. I'll get more into that when I actually talk about him specifically, so I guess I'll take this section to talk more about some of the side characters. Shout out to the night guard in the cold open. He actually did a pretty great job, and that whole sequence is probably the scariest part of the movie, to be honest. And yeah, for those of you who don't know, that actually was originally supposed to be Markiplier, but I am honestly kind of glad it wasn't. I feel like if the FNAF movie opened up on Markiplier's face, it would have been a little much. Like, we have cameos, and I'll talk about them later, but like, I feel like that would have been just a little bit too much. Also, that animated intro is fire. I won't even lie. I remember watching that in theaters, I slowly got teary-eyed because I was in sheer awe that the fact that I was sitting in a movie theater next to my dad watching Five Nights at Freddy's. That hit me like a truck. But moving on, I know that Aunt Jane is something I hear a lot of people talk about being unneeded in the movie, but again, it's a part of Mike's motivation to keep coming back, at least during the first 2 nights, because he obviously needs to support Abby with a job, or risk losing her to Aunt Jane. Jane just acts as like an early antagonistic force to get the story really rolling. She's also not like completely cartoonishly evil, because she turns down Jeff asking if they should just kill Mike, which like, yeah, that was a crazy as fuck thing for him to say. No one really addresses that. Really, the most meaningful thing she does in the movie is hire the delinquents to break into Freddy's to try and get Mike in trouble. And this whole sequence is pretty good. I really like the way it's shot, plus having all the animatronics kill in their most iconic places from FNAF 1 is pretty cute, such as Bonnie killing in the closet, Foxy runs down the hallway, and of course Chica's fat ass kills in the kitchen. Although there's like way more layers to Chica's, as the character who gets killed is named Carl, and he ironically gets killed by Carl. And yes, I know the cupcake's name isn't actually Carl, but it's Carl in my heart, okay? Whatever you call him, the cupcake is an absolute feral animal in this movie. Put that thing down, bro. Oh yeah, and speaking of the delinquents, Max's death is honestly the brutalest, and it's kind of unfortunate because it didn't really seem like she wanted to go through with this. I assume after babysitting Abby for so long, she got to liking not only her, but also Mike. I do, however, like Freddy luring her with his spirit form outside of the animatronic, which isn't something we ever really get to see in the games, but we do a lot in the books, and I always think it's pretty cool. In the theater, her death did actually shock me, because although they don't show it directly, she gets fucking chomped, bro. And speaking of like the Freddy kid, I also do really like the designs of the kids, them all wearing something that represents their respective animatronic. And the main spirit, which is Golden Freddy, played by Luke Skywalker, is actually pretty good. I think he plays just the right amount of creepy. Piper Rubio also does a great job as Abby, as it's very easy for child actors to be not very good, or even just sort of flat, and I think she kills it, as does Golden Freddy's actor. Abby's character as a whole is quite interesting because she has a connection to the spirits that no one else in the movie has, so much so that she actually draws them before Mike even ever goes to Freddy's, most likely because she's a kid similar to Oswald in Into the Pit. I think the movie as a whole is generally well paced, and I love the fact that it actually commits to taking place over 5 nights. They really didn't have to do that, but I'm really happy that they did. And speaking of making me happy, I was smiling ear to ear the entire time I saw this in theaters, and even when I rewatch it, because you can always just really tell how much passion went into this movie. From the sets to the animatronics, and yeah, I'll talk about them more later, to all the Easter eggs, and trust me, there are many of those, from simple things like Shadow Freddy to Sparky the fucking dog, which is insane. Which actually, there are 2 Sparky references, because of the diner as well. Even Chica's Magic Rainbow is in there, that fucking bitch. They also used all kinds of real merch on the set, which I just think is perfect. Like, why not do that? That would save you so much money. There's really only one shot in the movie that looks cheap to me. I don't really know what it is about this shot, but it just looks off to me. Other than all that, I actually think this movie is also low-key funny.
Is that guy okay?
Not super important, but still. The running gags of the Balloon Boy toy, and that's 2 things, got me giggling. Not to mention the whole, like, Tina Endo skeleton that the crew hid in many shots throughout the movie, which is also really cool, because it reminds me of those, like, super rare animatronics in, like, FNAF 2, for example. And then also, lastly, I think that the cameos are done well and tastefully. Corey Kinchin and Matt Pats are quick, and if you don't know who they are, it doesn't take you out of the moment. Plus, the Employee of the Month poster having a ton of FNAF creators on it is just such a cute thing. Scott naming Matt Pat's character Ness is a crazy deep cut, though.
While you were talking, Freddy scratched his balls.
No, I don't think this movie is particularly scary, but that doesn't ruin the experience for me. This movie is far more character-driven than horror-driven, and I think that helps for making you care about these characters by the end. Some horror movies don't do enough build-up so that when characters die, you just kind of don't care, which is also why I think a lot of them make the characters very unlikable so that you don't have to worry about trying to make you like them, and you can just kill them willy-nilly. If you wanted the movie to be scarier, I can understand that, but I will never agree with the take that it should have been rated R. I really don't understand why people thought it ever would be. Other than DBD, I say that because that's a rated M game, there is no adult-oriented FNAF media, like, at all. The games are rated T, and the books are literally at book fairs. And even then, I feel like the violence we got in the movie is good enough anyway, Max's death in particular, but if you've ever even paused to look at the aftermath of the delinquents getting stuffed, you can see they got pretty messed up. I personally value a decent story over focusing too much on horror or scares, something I think a lot of FNAF fan projects fall into. Which, yeah, leads me to the whole FNAF VHS thing. FNAF VHS was a very popular fan project format at its peak pretty much to the buildup of the movie. And for whatever reason, around this time, a portion of the fandom seemed to see those videos as true representations of FNAF when they are literal fan projects, which were of varying degrees of quality.
You deaf motherfucker! I said!
Because don't get me wrong, in the end, there's nothing wrong with making your own take on FNAF, but you do need to understand that that just isn't what FNAF is. FNAF has its own distinct vibe and style that many just misunderstand, in my opinion. It's one thing to simply dislike that vibe, but it's another thing to attribute qualities to it that it simply never even had in the first place, such as it being super gory or something like that. A lot of the debate about this movie being scary got so bad that people started fighting over the red eyes. They definitely toned them down slightly from the backlash from the first trailer, but I never really understood why it was such a big deal. Now look, do I think that the classic silver eyes are more iconic and genuinely really creepy? Yeah. Does it ruin the whole movie that they aren't present? No. Not to mention, FNAF itself really moved on from that design after FNAF 2 anyway. But I think the second movie will have less problems in terms of focusing on more action and horror, not just because they said that it would, but more so because they don't have to focus on building up these characters as much, like I said before. Now, one of the things I actually liked the most about this movie is how they answered the age-old FNAF question.
If I didn't want to stay the first night, why would I stay any more than 5?
Mike's initial motive is pretty much taking any job his very nice and innocent career counselor can get him in order to support his little sister Abby. Then, by the third night, that motive shifts to him becoming obsessed with the idea that the spirits can help him solve his brother's kidnapping, which I'm now realizing I haven't talked about that yet. A core part of the movie's plot is dream theory. Yeah, Scott can't help but troll us. When Mike was younger, he had a younger brother, and one day while on a family camping trip, he was kidnapped and never found. This messed up his whole family, as you would imagine, and although his parents had another kid, that being Abby, their mom died died shortly after. And I know some people interpret this differently, but based on the verbiage Mike uses, I think that led to his dad taking his own life. But Mike still to this day is stuck on his little brother going missing. So much so that he forces himself to relive the same dream every night, that dream being the very memory of that day. He induces it by playing sounds you would hear at a campsite and even a poster of the Nebraskan wilderness on his ceiling, plus sleeping pills. That probably helps a lot more, to be honest. But I actually really like this idea that we never truly forget anything. It's all there in the memory, you just can't always access it. And even though he never actually does figure out who took Garrett from the dream, he still does actually manage to relive the memory, which I don't know, I just think that's kind of a cool concept. I actually think Mike's character arc in this movie is kind of sweet. Having lost Garrett, he is so obsessed with the past, so much so that at his weakest, he would give up anything to find him or be with his family again, that including Abby. Although he does immediately regret giving up Abby and realizes that he has to focus more on Abby and move on with his life. I do remember, though, that right after the movie came out, there was a huge push on TikTok to make Mike one of those Sigma male archetypes, which is just really funny to me. Overall, I really enjoy Mike's character in this movie, even if he seems to be quite different from Game Mike. Josh Hutcherson does a pretty good job, and this especially comes through in the few moments that Mike actually gets emotional.
I will shoot you.
Now, you've probably noticed I've avoided mentioning much at all about Vanessa, and that is because I probably find her the most interesting. Firstly, there's the elephant in the room of her being added this early on in the timeline compared to the games. Now, obviously, there's a different continuity, so they can really do whatever they want, but it's interesting because she essentially plays the same role, that role being the reluctant follower. It's under a very different context in this story, but it works so well. Vanessa clearly became a cop with the sole purpose of helping William cover things up. This is evident by her clearly being the one who cleaned up after the animatronics killed the delinquents. A cool detail, actually, that reveals this is in night 2, Mike drops his sleeping pills when trying to reset the generator. So her showing up to confront Mike the next day with those pills means she has to have been there since the previous night. Also, speaking of that scene, I get her point here, but girly, those are prescription. I don't really think you can just do that to his pills. Her character as a whole was something a lot of people talked about, particularly negatively. This was mainly because people saw her character as weird and inconsistent, which I actually completely agree with. However, I believe that it's completely intentional. Throughout the movie, she constantly jarringly goes from warning Mike subtly, then to asking him to dance with her, or from building the fort to threatening to shoot him if he brings Abby back. I don't think this is bad writing or bad acting, but again, I 100% believe this is from the turmoil in her own mind, torn between her loyalty to her father or saving Abby and probably Mike too at a certain point. The movie's novelization actually kind of backs this up, but at the very same time, it has very different implication. The novel is a whole can of worms in itself. Elizabeth Lale plays this very well in my opinion. It can't be easy to subtly switch between two different moods. But now the big thing in this movie is obviously the reveal that she doesn't just work for Afton, but is his daughter. Now, I'm not convinced yet that that carries over into the games, but only time will tell on that. However, when we finally get this twist, we can really see the psychological toll he had on her growing up. Without even needing to see any flashbacks or something, you can really tell how afraid of him she is. And I am so interested in where they take her character more than any of the others. I talked about that a lot when I reacted to the second FNAF 2 trailer a few months ago, but of course I didn't hit record. That still haunts me. But it seems to me from the FNAF 2 trailer, she's being haunted by William, so they aren't just going to ignore how much trauma she has going forward, which is very good, because there is so much to address. She is potentially an accomplice to many a murder at Freddy's. Even if she deems some of them to be not innocent, therefore justifying it, that's a lot of baggage. I don't think we'll see a live-action Vanny or anything like that, although that would be kind of baller, but I think this character has so much potential, and I beg to any god that exists, or has existed, or will exist, that they don't fumble her like Steelwool did. This has obviously been said to death, but the animatronics are nearly perfect. Jim Henson's cooked beyond belief, to the point that when I first saw them moving in the Daco vlog, I didn't really notice that they were people in the suits. Chica is pretty much one-to-one with FNAF 1. The only real difference I can spot on her is that her hands have these like weird paw pads or whatever you would call this. Now Bonnie is pretty definitively blue, and his bow tie is like slightly bigger, but that's kind of it for him. Foxy, though, did cause a bit of a stir, because even though he looks so good, he has real shorts on this time rather than painted on ones, which I actually kind of like the real shorts more. Also, fun fact, it actually took up to like 12 puppeteers to bring Foxy to life due to the nature of his design. You can't really have someone in the suit, so I can only imagine what it is like to bring Mangle to life in the FNAF 2 movie. Freddy is the only one that slightly bothers me. His head is ever so slightly shaped differently, and I've talked about this before, and it's not enough to where it like is a big deal, but it's still just enough that I notice it every time I look at him. He still looks great though, don't get me wrong. I cannot express how much I love them sticking so faithfully to the game's designs. Oh, and I finally get to talk about one of the most controversial scenes since it primarily revolves around the animatronics. I don't care what anybody says, the fort scene is one of the most important scenes of the movie and is the most FNAF thing that you could have put in the movie. This scene in particular was the biggest point I saw brought up in reviews as something people didn't like or thought it was weird and out of place. And I think the problem stems from casual fans. And hear me out, because I'm not trying to insult anybody. One big important thing about FNAF and the spirits as a whole is they are not evil or particularly malicious. They don't kill because they enjoy it, they kill because they're either influenced to or believe that they're protecting themselves or other kids. The animatronics are children. They may have been stuck in their little zone for 20 years, but they are still innocent. The problem I realized is that if you only look at the games, they basically never touch this. I think a lot of people have the impression that the animatronics are just evil killer robots. The novels touch on this really well in the Fourth Closet. And I think really the closest the games get to this was the Souls in Innard voting out Elizabeth because she was low-key supporting her dad's actions, which really must have been really awkward for everyone else considering her dad is the only reason anyone is in this situation. But anyway, the fourth scene shows us that they are just kids and they really just want a new friend like Abby. We've seen something like this before in the Silver Eyes with Jason. Golden Freddy is done just right for me. He's incredibly mysterious like he should be. He only shows up mostly in Mike's dreams to gaslight the fuck out of him, but he also pulls up and potentially just straight up slimes Aunt Jane. They don't really follow up on her, so like, is she good? Now, you can argue that for a casual reviewer, he might be really confusing, but really the movie tells you all you need to know. He isn't Freddy, and there are also 5 kids in Mike's dream, not 4. My dad actually clocked that in the movie theater, and I was actually kind of proud of him for that. I know many are kind of iffy on his design, but I do like it as they're trying to make him more distinct from Freddy because the original FNAF 1 Golden Freddy is literally just a Golden Freddy. Shocker, I know. But overall, they handled the animatronics and the spirits very well, much better than the Silver Eyes did. Also, I know we all kind of thought that Garrett would be the puppet because of the little teaser in the credits, but based on the FNAF 2 trailers as well as some of the casting information, I don't think that's the case, especially considering part of this movie's plot is moving on to better focus on the future.
I'm the fun one!
Alright, now William, it's kind of hard to talk about in this movie. As I said in my Silver Eyes video, if the movie handles the animatronics better, then it has to be said that the book handles William better, and I stand by that. It has nothing to do with Matthew Lillard's performance, as I think he plays Steve the perfect amount of weird, and he plays William with the perfect amount of smugness and like superiority complex. They do slowly build up to the Yellow Rabbit throughout the movie, which by the way, the Yellow Rabbit goes so fucking hard for a name for him, like pre-Springtrap. But because of this mystery and the double twist that William is Steve, it makes it to where we can't really see much of him throughout the movie, or it ruins the impact of that payoff. If the movie didn't do well, and this is all we got, it honestly would be a little disappointing because we got so little of him, but we are getting more of him in the sequels, thankfully. Speaking of the William reveal, it is really funny that the picture Vanessa hands Mike is of him in his fursuit. It's obviously to save the double twist that everyone saw coming that Steve is William, I get it. They gave William's entrance so much aura, bruh. Matthew plays him so well. I love how quickly he resorts to trying to manipulate Vanessa, and I don't know if it's just me, but after stabbing her, I see the smallest amount of emotion for what he just did, but he ultimately moves on, which is interesting for his character because he may have actually cared for her in his own way, but ultimately if her use had run out, he's still willing to discard her, which is kind of sad. William is defeated rather quickly, basically for the reasons I explained earlier, but I like the way they do it, being straight out of the books. There's actually a few things that this movie borrows from the novels, actually, and I love just how pathetic William gets when he loses control. This seems to be an aspect of his character people tend to forget. He's a loser. He's pathetic. He wants to feel powerful, and the suit usually lets him do that. That's why I think he has that whole voice modulator thing to sound scarier. And I know a lot of people thought that I Always Come Back was corny, but yeah, it is. He's corny. It's also really funny to me that out of anybody, it's the fucking cupcake that triggers the spring lock. Put that thing down, bro. Overall, I really love this movie. Is it perfect? No, but it just has this aura to it that I absolutely love. You can tell just how much fun they had creating it. Shout out to the Newton brothers for that absolutely banging soundtrack. I can't play any of it because this video would get hella copyrighted like ASAP if it's not already. I'm scared. This soundtrack is so good. The Newton brothers actually went on to do the X-Men 97 soundtrack right after this, so good for them. Also, shout out to Emma, who's the director of the movie, and I guess just everyone who worked on it. That hard work and passion was not in vain. Also, like, thank you for Scott for like making the franchise or whatever, I don't know. I genuinely cannot wait for FNAF 2 and 3 and to see where they take these characters. And if the other movies are even just as successful as the first, I highly doubt Blumhouse will want to stop at just 3. Who knows, maybe 10 years from now we'll have a Sister Location movie and even a Fazbear Frights TV show. And before it ends, I just want to say thank you guys for patiently waiting for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and let me know your thoughts on the movie, because I really like reading your guys' comments. I low-key really hope they keep that Balloon Boy toy bit into the second movie.
I'm Freddy Fazbear. I'm gonna get you